Empire of Death is the last episode in Doctor Who Season 1, and much like the rest of the show, it is not shy to some plot holes. So today we are going to try and answer some of those plot holes and fix your issues you have with that episode. So let's just start off with the first one, being how does Sutekh actually return? We know in Sutekh's original serial, Pyramids of Mars, he's trapped inside of a time tunnel that has one end where he's imprisoned and one end where the Doctor is at the Priory. The Doctor defeats Sutekh by using a piece of the TARDIS console to make the exit of the time tunnel further away, forcing Sutekh to essentially age and die before he gets to his destination. That is what we believed in that episode, whereas I actually think that it still had that effect, but instead just increased the distance he had to go, but not quite far enough to kill him yet. If you watch that original Pyramids of Mars episode, when you go through this time tunnel, you just appear on whichever end you leave at. There's no actual physical door, and so I believe that the TARDIS console, because it was used to elongate that tunnel, I think that is actually where Sutekh exited the time tunnel eventually, which is why he could have been on the TARDIS since that story. I think they just spit him out by the TARDIS whenever he reached that time, and since then he has been clinging on and hiding himself away. Now moving on to the second plot hole, why does Sutekh die when touching the time vortex? Many people thought the time tunnel was now just the time vortex because of the re-edit in the Pyramids of Mars Tales of the TARDIS episode, but going back to my first point, I don't think it is, and therefore this is his first time touching the time vortex. Now, why does he not evaporate when he's clawing through the time vortex and reviving everybody he killed? Yet he dies when he touches it later in the episode. And my solution to that is that he was still attached to the TARDIS. Everything attached to the TARDIS I instantly assume is safe to the time vortex, a bit like how Captain Jack was, whereas when he did eventually touch it and die, he was detached. That rope that was connecting him to the TARDIS was destroyed, and so I think that's the difference between the two, and that is why he then gets killed by it. Now we move on to the third issue, and that is, how does the snow follow Ruby, and why does she have this song inside of her if her mother is just a normal person? And the show actually gives you this answer. The show tells you that it happens because that memory and period of time is so fragile that when you remember it or think about it, the moments from it start bleeding into reality. Which, if you remember the salted edge of the universe and the supernatural elements coming back into the show, this is a perfectly feasible answer. It also links to the artificial importance thing that was brought up in the finale, where Ruby's mother's only important because we made her important, and I think that's the same for this memory. It's all fantasy and almost magic at this point, and not really sci-fi, but Rusty Davies did say the show's going that way, and so there we are. I personally struggle believing this explanation, but for those of you that missed it, it is there. There is some attempt at answering that question. Now, moving on to issue 4, how does Sutekh's cancelling death work? Was he able to kill people like Captain Jack, who are meant to be immortal and can never die? Did he somehow bring back Gallifrey again? I simply think that because it's Sutekh dragging through these time periods in the time vortex, I think that it is just him reverting his own death, because he has his own like death particles like the sand. My guess is it just reverses that death, and so everybody he killed with that sand is coming back. And I would even count that as when he killed people in the original Pyramids of Mars serial. It just cancels out all of his death, and I'm quite happy with that explanation. Now, the fifth issue that we actually have is, why did Sutekh care so much about the identity of Ruby's mother? I didn't come up with this solution or theory. It was actually somebody called The Paper Mask who commented on my video ranking every episode of this season, so go check that video out if you haven't seen it. The comment said that Sutekh is almost here as a representation of the fans, as Sutekh has been on the TARDIS since the 4th Doctor era. He has seen every story that we have and more, and so seeing all these past adventures with the Doctor and Ruby, he gets to witness that mystery too, and he's wanting to get the answer. Even if that answer doesn't even matter in the grand scheme of things, his plan is foiled by just an ordinary woman because of the mystery surrounding it, and I really like that idea. I didn't personally see it that way when I first watched the episode. When you look at it a bit more, that kind of works. I still don't agree with making Ruby's mother a normal woman after all of the setup, but why wouldn't Sutekh believe she also is this mysterious being? If they're hearing the Doctor and Ruby talk about it, and Sutekh knows how powerful the Doctor is himself, why wouldn't he be interested in wanting to stop that if she could be this person that could take him down? And I love that idea. Now let's move on to the 6th issue this episode has, and it's that how is the God of Death being beaten by a piece of rope? Like seriously, how is the God of Death being taken down by a piece of string essentially? And honestly, the answer is way more simple than you think. It's that his powers only affect life. I've watched Pyramids of Mars now, and I've watched obviously the Empire of Death, and there's not not a moment where his abilities affect anything but life. It's only living things. Yes, he's got the death sand particles that cover planets and cause the universe to go dark, but he doesn't destroy anything that isn't living matter. When we see him in unit in the empty HQ, it's all still there, just the people are gone. And so why would he now be able to destroy rope? That wouldn't make sense that he can just simply destroy it. As for how and why it can pull him around, it's the TARDIS. We've seen that lift and pull literal planets. It can pull one oversized dog, surely. Also, why doesn't he use his claws to scratch out? You can see how slow moving Sutekh is. When he tried to grab the Doctor early in the episode, there was so much time he could have hit the Doctor, and it was like he was moving as slow-mo. We also never saw him move. He was always sat on the TARDIS. It's almost like after all this time sat holding the TARDIS, he's forgot how to move properly, and I feel like that can also be an explanation. Now let's move on to the 7th issue, and that is, why does Ruby's mother wear a mysterious cloak, and why does she point at the Ruby Road sign in hopes people will see it? And the answer is, I have no idea. I'm sorry, I can't fix that one. I mean, if you have any suggestions, drop them down in the comments down below. I'm sure other people would love to know how to make that make sense, because we didn't even get close to an explanation in this episode. Unfortunately, that is all I have for you today. Hopefully you have enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.